Germany is no longer relying on startup momentum. It is building the structures that determine how startups emerge and scale. The DE Hub initiative now connects 25 specialized ecosystems across Germany, spanning AI, cybersecurity, fintech, and advanced manufacturing. Governance has evolved, with the Federal Ministry of Digital and State Modernization assuming strategic responsibility for the digital-focused hubs. In parallel, 10 startup factories are operational, backed by 126 research partners and approximately 110 million in committed private capital. These layers together define Germany's current innovation architecture. Thomas Jarzombek operates at the level where this architecture is shaped. This conversation examines how the hub and startup factories interact and what kind of scale-up system Germany is constructing.
Welcome to Startuprad.io, your podcast and YouTube blog covering the German startup scene with news, interviews, and live events.
Thomas Jarzombek is a returning guest and now Parliamentary State Secretary for Digital and State Modernization in the German federal government, the ministry now co-responsible for the strategic direction of the DE Hub initiative across AI, cybersecurity, and other digital technology hubs. In earlier roles, he helped shape Germany's 10 billion startup financing framework, contributing directly to national capital allocation strategy. The DE Hub network has grown into 25 thematic ecosystems connecting startups, corporates, and research institutions and investors. With startup factories now active, this architecture extends into structured deep tech startup creation. This discussion focuses on government logic, venture discipline, and long-term institutional intent. That all said, welcome, Mr. Secretary.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Totally my pleasure. Let us dive right in. I was wondering, what structural capability does the hub provide that a decentralized startup landscape cannot achieve alone?
So basically the idea behind the DE hubs is to connect the very strong SME ecosystem that we have in Germany, the very strong research ecosystem, with the very strong, in the meantime, startup ecosystem, so that they all can benefit from each other.
Which measurable economic outputs determine whether a hub is structurally effective?
Well, I think in the end, the KPI that's relevant is the question, do companies, corporates, startups, do they use these hubs or do they not? Because I think they have a lot of opportunities and different opportunities. And once they are heading to these DE hubs and they say we go in and we spend resources on this, I think this is the measure for us to say it works. And we want to see some outcome of that. And that's also something you cannot measure only in quantitative figures. But what we see right now is that there is a lot of networking going on, and also companies are getting bigger that are working inside the DE Hub initiative.
Mm-hmm. And the basic idea is to lay the economic groundwork for future economic growth.
So it is, and what we focus are verticals. So we have very specified topics, and we want to bring together all the actors in that scene. For instance, when you're looking at e-health or digital insurance business, or on different kind of AI. So these are topics, logistics, for instance. These are topics where we want to bring the scene together. As I already said, research, the SMEs, and also startups and upcoming persons who are willing to found a company.
Mm. When I studied business, everybody was talking about competitive advantage. Newly told in startup terms, it's the mode. So where does coordination generate a competitive advantage, and where does it risk becoming just simply friction?
I mean, if you want to found a company, you have to understand a branch, and you have to discover what are the players there and where could be my niche or my idea, or what could be my USP, the product I can deliver nobody else delivers. And that's exactly what a network like the ones from the DE hubs pretty work for, because you get to know all these actors, you see what kind of topics are going on in this industry, and where can be a niche for me to get into, to step into. Another thing is to better understand what are challenges and where can I build technical solutions that can help in this industry. And all this is going on here. You get ideas, you get also technology from research institutions where you find world-class researchers which are not willing to found their own company, but are looking for the ones that want to bring out what's in their research. And so these are advantages of the DE hubs. And it makes it also politically visible. So in the end, this is also a point, because there are constant meetings, and you get to know also political actors that can be in some of these industries pretty interesting, especially then when it's regulated, highly regulated.
Mm-hmm. Thinking about medical field, finance, and so on and so forth. Plus, I'm sure you talk to important people, especially Finanzamt. What I always tell in my podcast: don't mess with Finanzamt. What assumptions about innovation clustering have you revisited in recent years?
Yeah, what's obvious is that you see clusters all over Germany. And I think that's a difference that's important also for everybody coming from the international side to understand that Germany works differently than other countries, where you have one centralized capital and major enterprises there. And everything's going on that single place. So in Germany, it's different. You see there's a very vibrant ecosystem for startups in Berlin, also in Munich, maybe more in the deep tech scene, but also you see North Rhine-Westphalia, very strong upcoming, very strong industry region, also the Stuttgart region, for instance, Frankfurt as the place for finance, Hamburg in logistics, and so on, the east of Germany with world-class when you look at chip technologies. So Germany has a very broad landscape, and there is not the single place. And therefore, the e-hubs can be very helpful to understand where do you find the experts, where are the ecosystems. And we try to attach to local ecosystems. For instance, if you look at this silicon and chip industry, it's obvious that you have to go to the Dresden region, and on the other side, that helps you to identify where networks are and where the heart of this very specific industries lies. And this is something that the e-apps can deliver.
Mm-hmm. What specific evidence led to that revision? I mean, I'm always telling the people you shouldn't be blindly walking into spot A or spot B and do some research before. Actually, before AI assisted, that research was much more time consuming, but then you can learn that Germany is a federal state. And also, as you already said, the startup hubs are pretty widely spread. So I was wondering what concrete evidence led to that revision in innovation clustering in you thinking about it.
So we make with the e-hubs, as with every other project that government's doing, scientific evaluation, and that's positive. So that's from our result a checkpoint. If you look at from the eyes of potential customers or of companies or investors who are going there, where would you start? If you say, so I want to go into that silicon industry, where do you want to start? And how do you get to know all these actors there? And especially when they are not startups. I think this is pretty a challenge. So how to meet the scientists, but also how to meet this whole SME ecosystem. And this is something where really the apps can help to find network events, also to have to get to know people who are aware of the network and can guide you to all the relevant persons and all the relevant institutions in the region that you want to attach.
Mm-hmm. You already talked about network. How is private capital integrated into the eHub framework while preserving independent venture discipline? Because a lot of our audience is investing either professionally or as a business angel privately.
So the DE hubs are intended to be networking hubs. They are not intended to be investment vehicles. And so this is the reason you already said in the beginning that we started years ago this 10 billion future fund for Germany, and we have High-Tech Gründerfonds and KfW Capital and a lot of initiatives that bring out financial benefit or do investing in startups and companies. The basic idea of the eHubs is building a network and not to invest in something like this. And if you find opportunities there and you say, I want to invest in younger companies, or maybe I could invest into SMEs, that's also possible. So that could be a place where you identify targets, but it's not an investment vehicle.
Mm-hmm. We go now a little bit about out of the explaining of the structure and look a little bit on the bird's eye view, because there should be a certain threshold where market forces dominate over structured coordination. Where is that threshold?
What exactly do you mean with threshold?
There's one part where you nurture and incubate little startups because they need some protection. And then at one point, you kind of need to let them out there. Where would you say is that point where where they have to confront the hard reality of business?
They do have. No, I understand. They have to do it from day one, because this is not some kind of a co-working space or something like this. So as I already said, so the DE hubs are networks. Yeah? And from these networks, you need to find partners, customers, and investors, and all that's needed. And so you're confronted with the hard reality from day one. There are further programs from the government you can benefit from. But to be honest, also on this, I think we are living in a market economy. And so therefore, every company has to do their homework for themselves at the beginning. And that's not the game. So it's not a kind of an incubator or accelerator or a company builder or something like this.
Mm-hmm. You've been already talking about the different governments here in Germany. So you have the federal government, you have 16 states. And I was wondering, where does the ultimate governance authority sit when you have divergent priorities between federal and regional?
I don't think it's diverging, because in one thing we have the same aim to foster business. And that's the reason why the regions say, and the federal states. So we want to foster economy here, and we want to attract investments. So this is what we have in common. And we don't force any federal state to start a DE hub. The other way is true. They are pitching for starting the e-hubs and say, so we have a very strong ecosystem here, and so please come and support us with this label and the strategy of the e-hubs. And so we are very open on that. But if you want to start, especially in a very regulated business, I think this is all over the world. I mean, if you look at Europe, you find GDPR, AI Act, and so many regulations. And I think, like also in the US, you have a lot of local and state level regulations. And to handle with all this, the apps can help, because you meet there also the people from the government and legislators and all the ones that can help you, maybe, especially if you have a new business case and say, so how can we roll this out in this framework of regulation? And can you maybe adapt it to us, or can you help us, or can you build a regulatory sandbox? So these are options.
Mm-hmm. Do you also help the different hubs to become equally powerful, equally successful when there are differences in performance?
I think everyone is his own startup, and so that's what we see. We have this connection over all these DE hubs, and so they exchange their views, they exchange experiences, best practices, everything around that. So also with the connection of the whole DE hub ecosystem all over Germany, they can also better come to politicians and government representatives on the federal level. That's obvious the case, but everyone is its own startup, so to say, and its own initiative, and they also have to deliver for themselves. And as far as I understand, they like to do this because they have a lot of freedom to do what they like to do and where they see where opportunities are.
After the break, we examine a critical question behind Germany's innovation architecture, how coordination, founder autonomy, and venture discipline coexist inside a system that increasingly combines public structure with private capital. Welcome back, guys. I'm still here with State Secretary Thomas Jarzombek and talking about the German startup system, especially the e-hubs part and startup factories here. How do the hubs protect founder autonomy within a coordinated national model?
I don't think that they protect something. They should enable. They should enable, and they should bring new ideas into industries, into very specific industries. That's what the hubs are doing.
Mm-hmm. They are public constructs. So I was wondering, is there a mechanism that ensures execution speed over dilution by oversight? I know in public entities, it's in Germany pretty popular to have this circle of decision, this decision maker involved, and so on and so forth. How do you limit that a little bit more at the e-hubs?
Yeah, because they have a lot of freedom, and so they are kind of a startup by themselves, and they're pretty free to do things, and they need to attract the local or the industry ecosystem, which they are focusing on, and they can only survive and also scale when they get support out of that ecosystem. And so that's completely different as the governance is in a typical government structure, where you're true. I think everywhere around the world there's a lot of bureaucracy, and decision making is a broad process. But these DE hubs are pretty free in doing their business as they want to do it, and they need to attract companies. This is the only way to finance them and to be successful.
Mm-hmm. You now have 10 startup factories live, 126 research partners engaged, and substantial private capital committed. How do you prevent the fragmentation between the hub ecosystem and factory-based startup creation?
The factories have a different approach. These factories work on campus level. They work at universities, especially. And for instance, I'm coming from Düsseldorf in the Rhineland region. We have a startup factory, that's the Gateway Factory, and it focuses the RWTH in Aachen, the Technical University Aachen, the University of Cologne, and the University of Düsseldorf. And so they should enable scientists or even young scientists, students, to get entrepreneurs. And they skill all the ones on the university level. They explain them what's entrepreneurship, what do you need, how do you achieve it. And if you really start your business, or if you build a spin-off out of university, they can also help you by coaching to explain, okay, how you should do things, and how does investment work, and how does finance work, and so on. So that's a completely different approach. And this is really meant to be especially for incubation. That's the level, incubation on universities. And the e-hubs are focusing on all the companies that are existing in the ecosystem, which are already on the place, SMEs. And also there are scientists that also cooperate with that and bring ideas there and say, so is there an SME that maybe can take my idea and build a product around that? And this is also an opportunity for startups to build an own business, or to make a spin-off out of something, and to get to know other partners in this industry. So both work perfectly together because they focus different scenarios or different stages on building companies. And also the e-hubs, it's not necessary that in the e-hub that you're coming from a university or building a deep tech company. That can also be business models that don't require to have 5 PhDs.
Now we do understand a little bit more. Startup factories are mostly for helping university spin-offs, startups, IP getting out there as startups.
To attract people to make spin-offs. So it's one step further even. It's not that there are teams that say, I want to make a spin-off. They want to attract people to think about the idea of building a spin-off and to explain them how to do it and to help them with their first steps. And as you already asked for protection, I think protection is basically also part of the idea of these factories, to protect young scientists that don't have any experience in business, don't have any experience in investing and in startups, to help them to build a company around their technology.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of people who say, you should talk to another person and validate this. We heard across the world from Tokyo to Rio de Janeiro, from Silicon Valley to Cape Town. So I was wondering, how should international investors interpret this layered model? Is it a signal amplification or just expanded state involvement?
You mean the e-hubs or the factories with that?
Yeah, both together, seen as a layered system.
Okay, so starting with the factories, as universities are founded by the government and are public universities, it's obvious that it's a public issue. And we are fostering very specific the problem that we have a lot of very excellent researchers, but not enough spin-offs and not enough investments into these spin-offs from university side. So this is what we focus with the startup factories. When it comes to the e-hubs, to be honest, we don't spend that much money on that. That's not a program for subsidies because we build networks. We give them also access to authorities. But in the end, they have to bring also their own finance. That's important. If not the business side is investing and using these e-hubs, it won't work. It's not the idea of government to say, so we need some further bureaucracy or government structures. No, the idea is to have a support scheme for the business side. And it only works if companies invest in there and say, we go there and we bring our employees and our decision makers to these e-hubs. So that's where it lives from. And therefore, they have a lot of freedom to do things like they want to do it, but they can only exist if they see the commitment from the industry side.
I see. When I was preparing for this interview, I was wondering your input on one question. Europe produces world-class startups, but fewer global technology champions, especially in the area of hyperscalers. In your view, what exactly does the scale-up system break? Where exactly does the scale-up system break down? Capital markets, regulation, or something else?
Yeah, I think it's pretty easy. Germany is economy number 3 worldwide. We have the 3rd biggest economy in the world. And even there are a lot of countries which have a lot more inhabitants than Germany has. And even we are in front of Japan. They do have nearly 50% more inhabitants. So we are very, very, very successful in all the industries where you see German products. And these are a lot of industries. And this is, I believe, the reason why it's very much investing here in all these successful industries. And in the beginning of the internet economy, I think from talent side, from investment side, from every angel, the focus was always more on these existing industries. And I think this will change in the moment that some of these industry could go down, maybe in automotive, I don't know, but quite now, until now, we're pretty successful in that. And so this is the reason why the startup ecosystem is filled with talents, also filled with good technology and ideas. We have companies that are worldwide successful. Get Your Guide is maybe something obvious. They're delivering holiday experiences all over the world, a global market leader, and we have more of them. So these companies are there. But as you say, hyperscalers are building IT infrastructure. That was not one of the industries. And we had players like Siemens or like Nixdorf, but they went a different way. And Siemens is very much investing in medicine devices and things like that. And so it's decision by the market. And fun fact is that a lot of these Silicon Valley funds, which are investing in all this global tech ecosystem, are filled with German money. There are a lot of German family offices that are investing in all these A16Z and Sequoia and whatever funds. And so therefore we benefit in some way, and our family office also benefit in some way from even all this.
Yeah, we talked about successful startups. Also, what came to my mind just recently, Stark Defense, Helsing, or BioNTech, of course, a shining example. They already work pretty well, and I'm sure we all hope that the current program gives more successful entrepreneurs, more successful startups a ramp to start. Do you see any conditions under which Germany would move from a more coordination support development approach towards a more capital intensive growth posture, meaning investing more state capital?
Well, we're investing so much state capital in the meantime, so we increased it by 5x over the last years. And right now, we already spoke about the future fund with this 10 billions and more. And so I think in the end, we need to attract private investing and private money. So right now, for instance, we have debate about this EU Inc., and I think the EU Commission will come over and support this initiative. I very much appreciate that. So this is, for instance, this week, one of the topics. Another one is to making AI Act more simple and to clarify it. That's also pretty important to bring talents here or to bring talents back. We see also a lot of German engineers working in Silicon Valley. And therefore, we have a lot of things to do, and we're working on that to make regulation more easier, to attract more private capital here. That's what we're actually doing, and I think this will work out more than spending more and more government money. I don't think this is the right path, because government money follows complex rules everywhere in the world, and maybe it follows also different interests than the business side. And therefore, I think in a market-driven economy, it's important to have private investments here. One thing maybe to add. In Germany, we live very much from the Mittelstand, the SMEs, the medium-sized, the mid-caps. So this is a strength, and we have all these hidden champions. This is I think it's invented by Germany, these hidden champions. A lot of companies that have 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 employees, and they are world leaders in very specific technologies. And so this is the strength of our ecosystem. And not everybody investing in Germany says, okay, when I invest in a young company, I want to build a scale up that rolls out something worldwide and will get a giant company. I think the philosophy here is also that a lot of people are investing in companies and to say we want to build a mid-cap company, one that's a new hidden champion that's very successful in a very specific technology or industry. And so with this philosophy, Germany is very successful over decades. And so this is a different approach than the one that we see in Silicon Valley to say, okay, you need to scale worldwide or you have to die.
I just talked to an investor in November. The interview was recently published, and he talks about those investment cases not as unicorns, but as camels. Even though I think from the marketing side, it needs a little bit different wording, but I totally know where you're going. Germany has a more coordination-led architecture, and the US blitzscaling style, on the other hand, they represent fundamentally different strategies for global technology leadership. What do you think would produce a more durable competitive advantage? Does Germany's current model retain the flexibility to shift if the evidence supports it?
I think until now, the existing ecosystem is really successful. I just can repeat, we are the number 3 economy worldwide. And so this shows that the way we went over the last decades was pretty successful. And I think it's like in every enterprise that's successful, you're staying with your philosophy and with your system. And so that's where we are. Maybe AI changes things more and more. So we focus from the government side also very much more on AI, because this will shape a lot of industries. And it also will change the way how to earn money in industries. And therefore, it's from our side necessary to go much more into AI. But we see opportunities right now to build solutions for all the verticals for specific industries with small teams. You can see it at Steinberger with OpenClaw that really small teams or single persons can build very powerful tools and very powerful solutions, because all these AI instruments are so much more powerful than they have been 1 year ago. And this is an opportunity also for Germany and in our ecosystem to build solutions for specific industries. And there also this DE hubs can play a really important role to orchestrate that process and to bring young founders together with these industry champions and to say, okay, we want to go into this AI workflows and we want to build it by ourselves and not only to buy products from Google or whomever. And so I think right now there's a huge opportunity with AI. As always, there is challenges or risks on the other side, but the risk is to miss the train. That's really the biggest risk that we see on AI. And so therefore the e-hubs can play a really important role to integrate or to build a launch pad for young entrepreneurs, for AI developers, to get access to these industry champions.
Mm-hmm. Looking a little bit into the future, in 10 to 15 years, if the startup factory and the e-hub architecture succeeds, what global companies should exist in Germany that would not exist otherwise? So what difference would it make?
So the good thing about a market-driven economy is that this is not a decision by politicians, and it doesn't need the fantasy of politicians. It needs the fantasy of the market and of the young entrepreneurs and of people with ideas that want to bring them to life. And this is what we are heading for. People like this who have ideas, who want to get to the markets and to show that they can deliver. And so I have no clue what will happen in 5 and 10 and 15 years. AI will change such a lot, but I'm pretty sure we will see really fascinating new companies and new business cases, and we would love to see them here.
Mm-hmm. I would guess right now something to do with AI, industrial tech, climate tech, or does something else come to your mind?
Yeah, all of this, and I think AI right now, it's not a very exclusive point of view that AI is the number one topic right now, but also sustainability is something that Germany pushes for a long time, and we're going on this track. We want to get carbon neutral, and therefore this brings also a lot of opportunities for new technologies, for carbon-free solutions, for carbon-free industries. Into the market, and I think you find the right framework and infrastructure here for building something like this.
Mm-hmm. We already talked about the potential output in 10 to 15 years. For the last question, I was wondering what would need to be demonstrably true for the DE hub and startup factory architecture, looking back like from 10 to 15 years now, to be considered a decisive structural upgrade of Germany's innovation capacity?
I think they will be both, as long as attractive as the economy, businesses, entrepreneurs, actors from the financial ecosystem involved in that and invest in that. And both infrastructures only can work when they have commercial investments. They're built in a way that they need them for their finance. Also, the startup factories, the way they were constructed was that First, they needed to find private investors and to get a guaranteed amount of private investments, typically 10 million euros. And the second step was that the government said, so we then provide you with an additional 10 million. But first they had to do successful fundraising. And in the DE hubs, it's the same thing. They need to attract businesses. They need to attract private partners that invest in that ecosystem because we don't spend a lot of money in their infrastructure. So it's necessary that this actors from the market believe in that and put money into that. And so this is the reason why I'm very confident that if they exist in 10 years, they were 10 years successfully attracting private money.
So basically the idea is bring us an idea where private investors invest 10 million and we go long.
This is the idea of the startup factories, right?
Great. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. It was a pleasure having you as guest.
So thanks for the opportunity. Have a good time.
Germany is assembling a layered innovation system, 25 coordinated DE hubs, 10 startup factories focused on deep tech startup creation and private capital integrated across both. The ambition is measurable scale-up capacity aligned with European digital sovereignty and venture discipline. Whether this architecture produces global competitive companies will be determined by outcomes, capital behavior, and institutional adaptability. Thomas Jarzombek operates where the system is designed and governed. This conversation documents the logic behind it. This is Startup Radio.
That's all, folks. Find more news, streams, events, and interviews at www.startuprad.io. Remember, sharing is caring.